one world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live edition. It is January 30th, 2013. And tonight, I have a very special broadcast lined up for you all. First, I want to thank my good friend and man who is playing executive producer for me behind the scenes and actually stepping up and doing more. I know Steve has done a few things here and there in the past with me, but he's actually stepping up to the plate and helping me more, and I appreciate that. So I want to give a big thanks and a big shout-out to my guest co-host for this evening, Mr. Steve Stars. Steve?
Hey, it's good to be back with you, Popeye. We've done some great shows, and this one is going to be one of the best we've had. I mean, it just came together miraculously this afternoon. Our guest is going to be quite informative, ladies and gentlemen. This is not something for the weak-minded or people who can't handle the truth. So you better, buckle up, because we're going to be talking about stuff that's very deep and very sinister.
I agree. Now, what could we be talking about that's so deep and sinister, Steve? Well, that would be what, and this is the way I posted it on Facebook and Twitter, and I kind of advertised the broadcast this evening, is what do Columbine, Sandy Hook, and pedophilia all have in common? Now, there is a common thread there, and there's a common thread amongst other events, too, that link to pedophilia. And this is something that's real. I know some people might not want to talk about it because they might make them uncomfortable, but too bad. The truth hurts, and it is what it is. Now, I want to introduce our guest for this evening because, ladies and gentlemen, he blew me away. I mean, he was talking to Steve and I earlier, and Steve and I were just dead silent while he was talking. We were just totally, our jaws were on the floor. The information is that incredible. So without wasting any more time, I want to bring to the broadcast this evening Mr. Ron Agner. Ron, welcome to the broadcast.
How are you?
First, I want to get out there. I want to plug the Facebook page of the young man that we're going to be discussing tonight. It's called Release Mark Taylor, correct?
Yes, and that's very important that people go to that Facebook page and like it. And if we can get that Facebook page viral, we can release a young man who was shot at Columbine, took 8 bullets, and was abducted and drugged because of the information I'm about to share with you tonight.
Okay, well, let's dive right into it. So Mark Taylor is the young man that we're talking about, and he was a victim of the shooting at Columbine High School. And he survived, obviously, the shooting. And after he survived, what happened? What started this chain of events that led to him being locked up and treated like a criminal?
Well, it started immediately. He was still in the hospital with tubes in his throat when he had people from, turns out to be Ken Salazar's office, a guy named Gary Kleinman, who was Salazar's lead investigator, telling Mark that he'd better keep silent or there'd be people after him. And what he was wanting to share is that he had witnessed some shooters, a SWAT team actually, on the roof of the school, and they played that off as being a air conditioning man, and he kept swearing that he saw these people with rifles up there. And lo and behold, we found the helicopter footage of a SWAT team on the roof. So for some reason, and we think it had to do with the timeline, they were trying to keep Mark silent then. But then he was in the Bowling for Columbine movie. Michael Moore used him to promote his agenda. And he had gotten a little popularity, and a woman by the name of Dr. Ann Tracy chose him to go around speaking engagements when she was talking about the dangers of psychotropic drugs. So he became quite a little spokesperson and had been traveling around the country. And as soon as his mother, Donna, had kind of loosened up the apron strings on him, he was alone in Colorado Springs, and immediately they captured him off the street, claiming that he had made a threat against the bookstore. And if you knew Mark, you'd realize he's very gentle. He's a very good Christian boy. He would never do anything like that. And they never gave him a trial or anything. They just put him in a mental institution and drugged him. And then Donna was in fear because she had one of these doctors down in Colorado Springs, this happened in Colorado Springs, tell her that Mark's life was in danger. So as soon as she was able to get him out of that institution, they decided to go to New Mexico in order to escape this fear of that happening again. And lo and behold, they're on their way to California because the house that they had in New Mexico had a leaking gas system. And Mark was kind of showing some signs of some respiratory problems, so she stopped in Arizona to just have him make sure it wasn't something happening because of all of his injuries or whatever. So they abducted him there. And she couldn't get him out of the Arizona institutions. They even tried to make him a ward of the state and take parental rights away. Totally lied to the all these people with fiduciary duties to protect Mark, for claiming that Donna was not even around, and in fact Donna was beating down the door trying to get her son out. So we found her a pro bono attorney that went on, fought on her behalf, and we got Mark out. She comes back to Colorado on this attorney's advice, and he's doing fine, except suddenly they've taken him off these drugs too quickly, and he has a seizure. And I swear it was frightening that, his eyes are rolling back, and I was trying to provide first aid, making sure he looked like he was going into shock, so we had to call the paramedics, and they took him to Denver Medical, and they've kept him in the system ever since, and she's still trying to get him out. But for some reason, they tried to destroy Mark's life because of what he was saying. He was a whistleblower. And so here he is standing up against these big drug companies. He has an attorney, John DeCamp, who represented him in the lawsuit against Solvay Pharmaceuticals, because it's common knowledge that Eric Harris, the boy who shot Mark, was on these psychotropic drugs.
And that would be the same John DeCamp who was connected to exposing the Franklin cover-up, correct?
Right. Lately, we've learned that he exposed the Penn State tragedy long before, back when he was investigating the Franklin cover-up. The tentacles led to the Penn State campus.
Ron, I'm going to cut us off because we got a break sneaking up on us.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, hang out right there. Time's just flying right by. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss the rest of the broadcast. We'll be right back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So, getting back into it with my guest, Ron Agner, we got interrupted. We were just getting into the John DeCamp connection. And I don't know if many people, Steve brought up a good point, and so did Ron during the break, that a lot of people might not remember who John DeCamp is. They might recognize the name, but not be able to put the face to it, and the info to connect to it. And some people might not even know who he is at all. So to kind of give you a brief intro of who John DeCamp is, he's a Marine veteran, Vietnam. He was, a state senator, Steve? Right?
Yeah, I think he was an attorney for quite some time. Ron will be a little more.
Well, he was an attorney. I think he was I think he was a state senator, if I remember correctly. But he's responsible for pretty much exposing the Franklin cover-up, and to at least bringing it to what we know of it today, the mainstream, I guess you could say. And he was interviewed for this movie that I think it was the Discovery Channel that did it, or somebody. They put it together, and then all the copies got bought up by the Secret Service. And then a year later, somebody mailed him a copy, and it got out on the internet. I urge everybody to go Google the Franklin cover-up and John DeCamp. And I'll let Ron, because I want to give him the floor, and I'll let him get into detail. But that's a little bit in a nutshell who John DeCamp is. And he's the guy, he's an attorney, and he exposed all this stuff with the Franklin cover-up about how there was rampant pedophilia in the houses of politics, you could say, and all the way up to the White House, connections to Boys Town. I've talked about this, where they ship kids in for pleasure, and this is a big thing. It's connected to Jimmy Savile. It's connected to Sandusky. It's connected to – this is a worldwide pedophile ring. And I've talked about this many, many times. All the listeners know this. Anyway, DeCamp exposed the Franklin cover-up, the connection to Boys Town and Washington, D.C. politics, and how they were trafficking little boys in for sex and things like that. And there was way more to it. It's a lot deeper of a tale. And I urge you to go check out Conspiracy of Silence. It's on YouTube. You can see it. Conspiracy of Silence. It's on federaljack.com, too, underneath the video section. And make sure you get the book, The Franklin Cover-Up. Ron, go ahead. So you were just getting into how John was Mark's attorney defending him.
Right.
Okay.
And because of that, he was allowed to go into some sealed files. And also the basement tapes that the two boys made in the basement of one of their homes. And also the depositions of the killer's parents, the Harrises. Now, we have some of those depositions that the state didn't get when they ransacked his office. Yeah, he was on his way back to Colorado when I guess he gets a call from his office saying that Colorado authorities were there ransacking it for all of his Columbine files, and they didn't get them all. So John's very clear on making his statement that when he says things, that he's quite capable of documenting what he says, and he's willing to have anybody come after him for lawsuits in case they think he's wrong. And he's won every lawsuit that he's ever had against the Franklin cover-up, so he's got a good track record. But in this case, we know, and let me first explain that our investigation was independent of John DeCamp's. He was under gag order, so he didn't share any of this with us, but we found out on our own, simply because we found out the written motive of the Columbine shooters, which, just to paraphrase it, it's getting even for their January incident arrest. So if you have a computer, just Google January incident, and you'll discover what we learned about that arrest. And our key piece of evidence that started us in the right direction was a picture that Eric Harris drew the night of that arrest that was cleverly covered up with some foreground, but you can clearly see that there were two stick figures in that. One of them on all fours, the other one in a raping position, I guess you'd call it. And the one in the raping position had a star on its chest indicating a police officer. And we took this file to all the authorities that we knew that would have the a position of trust or responsibility to do something about it. Didn't get anywhere, obviously, with Jefferson County because it pointed the finger back at them. So actually, I had a past professional friendship with Sheriff Sullivan. I knew him from back when he was a patrolman for the Littleton Police Department. I was the president of the Littleton JCs, and we ran parades, so we knew the people running parades and things. So I was requested by the families of the dead and injured to take this picture and see what Pat Sullivan thought about it and what he would do about it. And obviously I didn't get any cooperation there. And I also forwarded it to Sheriff Anderson of El Paso County. And several years later, we discovered it in a file. And they labeled the picture this time when they filed it, Walsh Butt Rape.txt. So that's the official opinion of what this picture represents to the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. And strangely enough, it has Sullivan's name on it because I used the same document to send to Anderson, and I marked off Sullivan's name. But you can see that Sullivan's name is on it. So they've known this stuff for years. Not only that, I've had opportunities to bring this to other people that were in a position of trust, including President Clinton, when I was asked to attend a fundraiser at the Adams Mark Hotel. And Donna Taylor brought me there and told me to tell President Clinton what we knew, and I did. And I also said I didn't believe that the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department should be conducting this investigation, obviously a conflict of interest, and he agreed, claimed that he was going to give us some help politically, and obviously he didn't. So, if you know anything about the Penn State tragedy in Sandusky and Joe Paterno, well, we consider President Clinton our Joe Paterno because we went to the top of this, and he knows that those two boys got raped. And also, I seem to be, nonpartisan in this because I can explain how the Republicans haven't done anything. For instance, Tom Tancredo was our congressman, and he even refused to talk to Donna. Also got Congressman Lamborn, who refuses to talk to Donna. We have Mike Kaufman. We've been to Mike Kaufman's office twice. We've even given him the sealed documents out of John DeCamp's office. He knows all about this. We've had Mark in there talking to Mike Kaufman. And this was all before the election. And we were telling them clearly that Ken Salazar was the key cover-up kingpin of the whole thing. Yeah, he was messing with Mark from the beginning. And then later on, they were having an issue of what to do with these toxic basement tapes and the other things that John DeCamp got to see. And they actually used Mark's name, and when I say they, but this is Salazar's group, to shoehorn themselves into a courtroom in which they claimed that Mark wanted a Dr. Elliott of CU to review these documents and make a report instead of releasing them.
Hold on, Ron. I'm going to cut you off right there.
I know that's complicated.
We got a break sneaking up on us. So right. The time just flies right by. What we're going to do, what I'll do on the other side of the break is I'll have you pick up right where you left off and break it down a little bit. Make maybe try to in a little bit of a nutshell make it easier for people to absorb into their noodle. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Tonight, my guest is Ron Agner, and we're talking about Mark Taylor. And before we get back into it, I want you to check out the page on Facebook, Release Mark Taylor. Go check it out. Go to Facebook, facebook.com. Most people have accounts now, right? And look up Release Mark Taylor. Give it a thumbs up. Spread the page around. Message them. If you're a radio show host, you have a podcast, whatever, contact them. We need to get this issue more spotlight. The more spotlight on this specific case. This case is like in one of those linchpin cases where it blows bigger cases wide open. We need to focus on this. And the fact that Mark's innocent, he was a victim in all this. And then because he was victimized by the bullets and by the kids that shot, they shot him first, And now he's being victimized by the state and the powers that shouldn't be because of what he knows, and it's disgusting. It just shouldn't be going on. So go to Release Mark Taylor on Facebook and check it out. So, Ron, we were talking about a lot of the courtroom drama, and during the break there was you made a really good point, and this is something that I don't think many people realize. Everybody knows that the two guys walked through the school, I should say, not schools, school, singular, with handguns, and they had shotguns. But I don't think a lot of people realize that there were bombs inside the building. And that's a big question, and that's something that's never covered, and that's something that's kind of breezed over. No one really looks at it. I've even had people tell me that when I've mentioned bombs that there was, I've never heard of that. I only heard of guns. Bombs, what are you, a conspiracy theorist? Did the government put them in there too? And it's like, no, I didn't say that. All I said was there were bombs in there. Now, you brought up a really good point. The reason they won't go near the bombs, because the bombs leads them down a path that inevitably leads to this massive pedophilia ring. So they don't want to touch it. They don't even want to go there.
Truly, the boys were interested in blowing up the school and taking out 500 children, and that's what we're in fear of. So all this talk about handguns and assault rifles, whatever an assault rifle is, I don't understand it, because bombs are what was the... and let me explain to you, we've discovered that Adam Lanza is a Columbine copycat. We've got several pieces of information now that, number one, there was a 4chan post prior to the tragedy, okay? That's kind of hard to fake if it happens before the tragedy, where a boy from Connecticut says that they're going to be reading about him the next day at 9 o'clock in the morning, that he was going to kill himself. And in that, he posted a picture of the Columbine shooters lying in a pool of blood. Okay, there's the first Columbine connection, okay? The second pre-post was a YouTube. And nobody's talking about this, but you can go to our website and you can see where we picked it up off the internet. The YouTube was brought down faster than we could actually get it copied. I don't know how to post or whatever, or how to screenshot, I guess is what it's called. And I actually contacted our webmaster to have that done, but it went down. But then I found another article where the police department is investigating this, and they've said that if anybody posts any kind of information claiming they're not who they are or whatever, that they're going to prosecute. Well, there hasn't been any prosecution, and there hasn't even been any mention of the YouTube. And the YouTube says quite clearly what was bothering Adam Lanza. I've got it right here. I'll see if I can find it quickly and read it to you. Yeah, right there in black and white on this YouTube, it says, grab my glasses, all she wanted was the picture-perfect life. I guess me being raped by perverts was not in her idyllic plans. Ever, I choose to go level 121 kill rule. I will swing the sword of destruction and live forever. I am Adam Lanza. Hate me, I will be immortal. Okay, does that not say that the boy was raped by perverts? Haven't heard any mention of them discussing that. All we want to talk about is guns. And we're thinking if this boy... Now, we did find another article in the Inquirer, but they're claiming judicial sources are saying that Adam Lanza also dressed in black like his heroes, Derek and Dylan. Okay, so he's identified with the Columbine shooters. And anybody that is interested in Columbine would probably find our website rather easily. You can type in January incident, which is the arrest.
Ron, you're kind of cutting out a little bit.
Okay.
That's better. Go ahead. Give out the web address again.
It's Columbine Family Request is our website. But some of these, it's just so easy. We've got over 3 million hits on our YouTubes. So did he learn that the Columbine shooters had an issue of being raped? I'm quite sure he did. And he was also a young man who had been raped. So we're seeing quite the connection that this boy has identified with these 2 raped boys. And the fact that he was also raped makes me think that maybe if they listened to Mark about his shooter being raped, that he might have, his information probably would have put some preemptive things in place so that these raped kids don't go to the schools and shoot innocent kids. So that makes it all our issue. Can I say, if you have an innocent child that you are protecting, when you send him to public school, he might be the victim of a raped child. So I just don't understand where there's any downside to helping putting some more safety nets in place to protect raped kids. It's something we should do anyway. And in this case, it is causing school shootings, because we learned the Platte Canyon shooting was because an angry parent went into the classroom with a list of girls' names because the school resource officer was getting girls pregnant. And we learned this church shooter, the guy that went into a mission here in Colorado and also into a church, killed several people, was also a victim of pedophile, because on his website we found another link to another young man named Ricky Rodriguez, who was also a victim of pedophilia, who went out to kill. So what we're seeing here is a pattern of pedophilic behavior that is causing school shootings. And it's very serious. And it's something all Americans and all parents should be concerned about, is the safety of their children. And the fact that we've got such horrendous, can I say, 1 out of 4 girls don't make it to adulthood. 1 out of 6 boys don't make it to adulthood. And those numbers are just unbelievable. So it's time, I guess, even though we have economic problems and we have to worry about our, them stealing our children's future through financial means, they're also raping our children. So let me just share with you that it's rape and pillage, not just pillage.
Yeah, I agree. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Horrific, horrific stuff, but it is the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Getting back into it. Ron, you made a good point how that anyone's child could now be a victim because not only of being shot in a school shooting, right? Because now you have to worry about whether or not how many other kids have been raped and are walking around messed up, and they've put them on these mental drugs, which could create another school shooting, right? Because they see this glorification by the media where he becomes infamous, and that's how he said, "I'll live on forever." That's what he meant when Lanza said that. That's what he was talking about. I'll become infamous. That's what he meant. I'll live on forever. Right. People will know who he is. But you also have to worry about your kid going to school and getting raped by perhaps somebody in the school system or a police officer. That's a big thing. I think that's a big red flag in this whole case. Is the what is it called? The January incident, I believe you said it was called, right? Where they were arrested like a year before. Right. Yeah. Right. And obviously something happened during that arrest, right? Where they were, and I'm talking about the Columbine kids, ladies and gentlemen. They obviously during that arrest, they were sexually assaulted by the police because the kids' drawings, and I guess there were the telltale signs of it, right? I mean, anybody with half a brain that looked at it.
We even have a video that of Harris in the lunchroom with the one of the kids taunting him. He said, here we go again, but this kid's talking. He says, "Hey, Harris, you got jacked up and in this case, you can see Harris's response to that. Number one, he doesn't deny it. He says, "I don't think so." And then you can hear another kid, if you're, real careful, you can say, "I wouldn't go there," to that, don't leave the kid alone about it kind of conversation. Then he goes on to, you can see him having his little tantrum right there where he looks down, he separates himself from the conversation, and he looks up like, "Oh my God," and then he looks right into the camera in the most evil way. And it's exactly what you would think of a boy that was being tormented about being raped. You know what I'm saying? Donna Taylor cries when she sees that, thinking that young man was being abused in that manner, and this is the boy that shot her son. You understand? Yeah, she's quite aware of what provoked him into shooting her son, and has a deep sympathy for him. And that's that's where many of the families that don't know this, they're still quite angry that it's all about those two crazy boys that are just evil. Well, they had, can I say they weren't the most perfect kids, but certainly they didn't deserve to be raped. And this is what happens, And what's worse than that is what we've learned since then. We've been to all the people that are supposed to be in the position of trust. Don't you think that the FBI and the Secret Service and Jefferson County and the state and the whole bunch of them could have figured out that the boys wrote a written motive and that there's a picture named Walsh butt rape, and kind of put it together and say, let's investigate that? Sounds to me like there might be something to that.
Yeah,
There's something in those boys' lives that upset them to the point where they went out and did such a horrible act. And it wasn't pushing and shoving in the hallways. The lie that they perpetrated is also causing Columbine shooters to pick up weapons and imitate the Columbine shooters, thinking that they've got the same agenda. The kids that are being bullied in the schools now think that Eric and Dylan are their heroes because it created quite a fan base by lying about it. We had an episode at it's a middle school across the street from the cemetery where we built a monument to the Columbine tragedy with the crosses. And in doing that, we were hoping maybe we could get the truth out and we wouldn't have to worry about all these copycats. But even the Columbine cover-up in itself lends everybody to want to learn more about it because they've covered up so much. So it never could go away. But in this case, a little boy, 13 years old, had been raised up to believe that these two boys were angry at jocks. He was having an issue with jocks, and he built a bomb to put underneath the jocks table, and he was going to blow that cafeteria up. And they caught him just in time. Can I say that's what we're afraid of, is someone that's going to copycat them, and possibly for all the wrong reasons. And we also considered that there may be some raped child out there that would realize the truth. And I think that's what happened in the case of Adam Lanza. And we won't know. Donna and I and several other people, we have a forensic psychologist that works with us also. We've all volunteered to go talk to the what they're calling the Sandy Hook Advisory Committee. And I think we've got some information to share with them. And if it doesn't stop at this time, are we going to wait till the next time? Because there will be some little raped boy at some point do the same thing when they realize that was the issue that Eric and Dylan were dealing with. What do you think that does to a little raped child when they realize that these young boys are still yelling rape from the grave 13 years after they're dead?
And obviously, you can see it wasn't a gun problem because there's more than one case where they're building bombs and there's bombs involved, but they don't want to talk about that. And like you said, because that leads to the whole pedophilia thing, and that's like a big thing that they can't touch. They don't want to go there. And when we were talking earlier, there's a lot of people that some people don't think that the shooting happened at all at the school. I think if it happened, like we talked off air, if it happened, it happened probably a lot closer to the Columbine shooting, which actually, if you look at some of the reports where they say the long rifle was left in the vehicle and he used 4 pistols, that's closer to the Columbine shooting because they didn't use AR-15s. They had shotguns and pistols. So him walking around with 4 pistols would be more true to the story of Columbine. And if that's the case, then what you see is the media taking an event that actually did happen and something that is tragic and has roots, a root cause that needs to be investigated, and is obviously not the gun. It's obviously something much deeper than that, and that's why you're being made to focus on the gun, because it's a superficial cause and they don't want you to look much deeper, right? I mean, they don't want you to look and see.
People have always questioned why it took 3.5 hours for the law enforcement to go into the school. And that's because the 2 shooters blew up a bomb south of the school, calling all the cops south, basically, is what that was, and letting them know that bombs were involved. So they knew enough about Eric and Harris at the time. They were pretending they didn't know who these boys were. But they knew enough about them at the time to know that it was Eric and Dylan, and that it was about bombs. And it was about bombs. They had put a bomb in one of their cars, loaded up full of gasoline and propane bombs and whatever, and had it sitting out there in the parking lot because they thought the first responders would be surrounding that car during the gunfight. And they were correct. The only things that kept it from happening is the bombs did not go off. And I can't guess why they didn't go off. Just hopefully maybe it was just the hand of God that kept them from going off, or it would have been a most horrible, worse than it was.
Did they find any explosives at Sandy Hook?
Not that I know of. Haven't heard anything.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if it was hidden. Go on, Steve.
Well, I was just going to say, didn't Carver, I think the guy's name was Carver, a cynical name for somebody who's at the coroner, the medical examiner, didn't he say all of the wounds that he examined were rifle round wounds? And I don't know what...
Oh, the guy at Sandy Hook? You mean the loony medical examiner that looked like a total actor? Didn't even know what he was talking about? Yeah, goofy two-shoes. Yeah, him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said all the wounds came from a long rifle, but if you watch... There's an NBC news clip, and it's still up on MSNBC's website in their video archives. It was the next day, and the guy's reporting on, it was in the morning, and he's reporting about the shooting, and he says, we've got some more solid details. We spoke with federal officials and local officials, and they said that the long gun was found in the car, and that the shooter used 4 pistols.
Yeah, that was first reports.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden the whole story got changed. It was an AR-15. He shot his way through the front door because that's what assault rifles can do. And I'm like, red flag, because I have to hoist the bullshit flag. I'm sorry, because...
I don't even care whether it's a little lie like that. When we're talking about our children, we better get the truth and all of it. Right. And I'm fed up with them. I had to deal with this at Columbine. We had I don't know what you call him, a counter intel pro, I think is what they call these people. He stepped up in front of the microphones, a guy named Mike Smith, and he's the one that spun the lie that this was about the jocks having fights with the trench coat mafia. And
you know what? I'm gonna cut us off because the top of the hour break's coming up, and time just flies by. I want to pick this up. I want to pick this up right here with the COINTEL Pro trying to get involved with Columbine and the investigation into it. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is January 30th, 2013. And in the first hour, I was talking to Ron Agner and hanging out with my good friend Steve Stars, who is sitting here riding in the guest co-host seat tonight with me. And the three of us were discussing the Columbine shooting and the connections to pedophilia and the Sandy Hook massacre. And just as the top of the hour break was coming up, Ron was about to get into how the dealing with the Columbine shooting, people that were researching it and investigating it and trying to bring truth out about what really did happen started to run into COINTEL operations, which, again, if this was just a random school shooting by 2 pissed-off teenagers about being bullied, and I'm doing air quotes when I say bullied, then why the need for COINTEL operations at all? I mean, that should be a big red flag. So, Ron, the floor is yours. You were getting into how you were being messed with by some sort of agent.
Yeah, Michael Smith gets up in front of the microphones, and the entire media parade, I guess, takes off on what he was stating because his seemed to be the juiciest story. And he was telling about how this was about the Columbine campus having a gangland war between these trenchcoat mafia and the jocks. Well, we learned right away that this guy didn't even go to Columbine. There was no Mike Smith on the Columbine rolls. And he also mentioned that he was playing right guard on the ball team, and one of the Rocky Mountain News reporters said, well, wait a minute, that couldn't be because my son plays that position. But they went with the story, and they wrote a redaction on about the 3rd page, and that was the end of that. They ran with that story, though. And then the story ran all the way into the the meetings we had, because I went to those meetings. And on one side of the room, you had the campus represented by the faculty, and they were all telling the committee that this had little to do with the Columbine campus, that they'd all come from different campuses, and there was nothing different about Columbine. But you had Bill Ritter as the, I guess, the locomotive conductor railroading this thing into believing, and this is against his own investigator who made a report that said she couldn't find anything that made it, she could identify to be something that was a problem. You know, your typical jocks that are, you know, honking their horn at night going by their girlfriend's house. That, you know, nothing serious. But in this case, he railroaded the commission into believing that this was all about the campus and kept that story alive, and it became official. And that's how easy it is to fool the American people. Bill Ritter was the governor, by the way. Governor, right, at that time, Bill Ritter? No, he was actually the district attorney for Denver, for the district attorney's office. Oh, okay. Need to do a profile on that guy, too. He's a strange dude. Yeah, but anyway, going on, we've even got, at this point, Governor Hickenlooper has threatened Mark's attorney because we had a free Mark Taylor website up, and he forced Mark to take that website down under threat of a lawsuit. So, you know, what I'm saying is even Governor Hickenlooper's office knows this thing, because they wouldn't have wanted him to take the website down if it hadn't had this information on it. Right. So we don't seem to have any friends that want to protect the children that are in position of trust. We're still out there yelling rape. And in this case, we're going to start yelling rape at the Sandy Hook tragedy also, because it's high time we started to pay attention to these raped children who are going out committing these horrible acts. It messes up their little minds. Yeah, this is a part of how they control the kids in the MK Ultra. Their little minds can't wrap around it, and then they start separating themselves and splitting their personalities over this. So you understand how serious this is. Well, that begs the question of, you know, were any of these events also contrived to help push a much larger agenda? And, you know, were the rapes and that used as a form of trauma-based mind control? We all of us here on this call and everybody listening to the broadcast knows, you know, at least if you're tuned in right now listening to me, you have some semblance of an idea about mind control. And it begs the question of, if this stuff, you know, obviously these kids were raped. So if they were raped, was it just a case of rape, or is it connected to something much bigger? And that would explain the necessity by the powers that shouldn't be to go to the lengths that they've gone to cover this up. You know, the intimidation, everything. Well, there's been talk that Columbine is being used as some kind of an experiment. And we know that because back in the late 80s, this was, well, maybe 7 years before Columbine happened. Anyway, there was a program on 60 Minutes, or 2020, I guess, Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs, and they were discussing death education at Columbine. This is all documented. The copy of that tape is kind of crude because it's been copied over and over again, but it has, you know, the program shows the kids from Columbine being brought into funeral parlors and watching them pushing bodies into the ovens. They have to go home and write about what they want as an epitaph, and it's really a way to, another way to stimulate kids into like a trauma type feeling, so that they're easily manipulated. You know, when you talk about death, that sends people to a different corner of the mind. And particularly when we have Harris that's out on his T-shirt, he said, what was it? Was on his T-shirt? He said, survival of the fittest, or I believe is what it said. But anyway, what you need to know, the key word about the written motive when it said, "My wrath for January's incident will be godlike." Dylan was wearing the word wrath in bright red letters. You can see the picture of him lying in the blood with the word wrath across his chest. So that's just another way to underline his written motive. And he says, "My wrath for January's incident will be godlike," not to mention our revenge in the commons.
Wow.
Other little pieces that fit together. We discovered that their anger wasn't directed towards the school. We have writings from Eric that says he loves school, but he hates schoolwork. That's pretty normal. But then he goes on to say, we don't know where we're going to plan ground zero. So why is it that they wanted to connect the venue to the motive so quickly? And then if you ever study Columbine, you'll see where all of the officials wanted to keep it inside the schoolyard. They wouldn't want to talk about what happened around them. And in fact, Dylan had a bumper sticker on his car that says, "I hate this town." So what does that have to do with Columbine when he says, "I hate this town"?
Yeah.
You understand, it wasn't about Columbine and what the kids had done to them. It's what had happened to them. And I guess they did get even, if that's what they were looking for, revenge.
Were they targeting specific kids? Or were they just randomly just acting out?
Random. Yeah, Mark didn't even know him. He had only gone to Columbine for a couple of weeks prior to that. Didn't know anybody.
So this was just this was them lashing out their wrath, since they knew. I guess they felt that they couldn't take it out on the police because they felt that the cops were more powerful than them. Being dominated by them. That's what rape is about. It's not about sex. It's more about, just for the listeners, it's not, rape really isn't about sex. It's more about domination and power. So they probably felt dominated. So I guess maybe they took it out on the students who they felt more powerful than, because they had this training or whatever. Okay, makes sense.
Dylan wrote an essay, and in his essay he talked about going around killing students. And at the end he says he did not understand what this character was doing, killing students, until he understood that he was killing students in order to engage the cops. In other words, I think they were trying to provoke the cops into confronting them, and the cops stood by.
Oh, they were probably... Oh, I get it. So they were probably in the school. I wonder if they had microphone... if we had audio recording, I wonder if you would have heard them say, "Why aren't the cops engaging us?" So the school shooting was more of like a baiting the cops into a trap, and then they would make the cops pay inside the school on their territory. They'd be able to light the bombs off. They'd have it already planned out where they'd have the crossfire, where they'd hit the cops coming in. That makes sense.
Okay. Well, not only that, the cops even explained it themselves in their own... Because there was a sign in the window where the teacher was bleeding to death. It said, "One bleeding to death." Remember that? And in this case, the cops said the reason they didn't go to that window and save the teacher was because they thought it was a booby trap for the cops.
No.
So they admit right there that they didn't engage because they were afraid that those two boys were after them, and they were. Yeah, in that message.
And that actually begs the question right there of how did they know that the boys were after them and waiting for them?
Because they had raped them, and they knew they had raped them. They knew all of this ahead of time.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like, bingo, yeah. Another red flag.
Yeah, they were sitting there trying to figure out, oh shit, what do we do about it? They weren't interested in saving children. Yeah, they were already in the cover-up mode. And in doing that, we initially learned that they knew who they were because one of the dispatch tapes had one of the officers saying, "Is that the Harris kid or is that the sheriff's kid?" In other words, either way, they knew who they were, and they were probably right. It was the Harris kid and the sheriff's kid, okay? Yeah. But anyway, that's when...
Back again.
Yeah, all right, we're back, guys. I don't know what happened. That was weird. I have to say, honestly, it's never happened before, ever. Literally, in the middle of what he was talking about, everything just shut down.
Every time.
I have to say, honestly, that was not a technical snafu. That was actually very kind of creepy. Right in the middle of talking what we were talking about, Skype.
Well, yeah, but it could have been almost any time in this conversation because I'm sharing a lot of information.
That was
and then
interesting.
And then then they denied that they had any prior information because the Brown family, Randy Brown and his wife Judy, had warned them that the boys were building bombs. That's why they had all the information they needed to stop it, is because they had given him Harris's descriptions of the bombs on his webpage and everything. They had all this written up in this document to serve to the, it's a search warrant. And then they didn't serve the search warrant, even though they had all this information about the bombs, the descriptions. They even had discovered fragments that matched the descriptions. And that should have been stopped right then and there. Had they gone to Harris's house and served the search warrant, that would have been the end of it.
Right. And CBS...
But no, they didn't do it that way.
60 Minutes covered all this,
enough,
right? Huh? Yeah.
What's that?
60 Minutes covered all of this stuff with it.
You can. Most of the stuff you can. Pretty much everything that I ever even used to send as links are still up. So anybody can still do their investigation the same way I did years ago, because most of these stories are still up. So that makes it very easy on me, because I can send you what 60 Minutes said, or I can show you, for instance, in the Platte Canyon tragedy, I still have the link to Channel 9 News when they're saying it's a parent. All morning long we're being told that it's a parent. And then later on their investigation claims it was a random camper.
Yeah.
You understand? Yeah, it's they like to change these stories, and then they don't provide you with any more information, and it doesn't make any sense if you add it all up. Okay. And my information is, yes, it was a parent, because I actually had a guy come in that matches the description on a restaurant in the same canyon about a mile from that school. And I had a guy come in just prior to that saying that he was angry and he was going to go get his daughter out of that school. I didn't know anything more than that, but then when I discovered that it was a parent, then I started investigating it. And yes, that's what they were saying on the initial broadcast, and you can still find that. But all of these pieces make us wonder what the hell's going on, because we're asking the questions that should be asked. We're asking the hard questions, and we're not getting any answers. And I live in a town where a few of the townspeople had gone down to the school board and asked these questions, and then they went home without any answers instead of coming back with pitchforks and torches. You understand?
Yeah, it's getting bad out there, because the public knows something is wrong, and they're not getting any answers on all of these things. We live in a dysfunctional society, and a government that is run by some psychopaths operating behind the scenes that are terrorizing us almost daily, and there's no answer, and the authorities are afraid to talk about this for some reason. They're afraid to do their jobs. It's like Nazi Germany. People are just following orders. This is what got the Germans into trouble, following orders and listening to hot, boot-nailed, jack-booted idiots who tell you all these kinds of things while they snivel like spineless sponges over in the corner somewhere. I mean, it just makes you sick to watch.
At the same time they're defending the system, they're betraying their own children. Own children.
Yeah.
When are they going to wake up to this? The Third Reich, Mein Kampf, it kind of explains how the Germans did it. And it sounds exactly what they're doing now in Sandy Hook. Whenever they have one of these tragedies, they parade the dead children out, because our sympathies are for these children, and we're willing to give up our freedoms for this security for our children, right? Well, that's how Mein Kampf controlled the people in Germany, and a number of these school shootings worldwide, you can link back to it. But in this case, I think that's how they got the guns out of the Australians' hands.
Yeah, it was. They had school shootings in Australia, and it was the same thing. And actually, if you go when you go look into the school shootings there, it's the same type of strange weirdness going on with the kid. And it wouldn't surprise me that if you looked into the backgrounds of the kids at the school shootings in Australia and in the UK, it would not surprise me one bit if you looked into any of their backgrounds, if any of them were molested, raped, and had any connections to this same pedophilia ring.
That shows you how powerful that kind of information is on the public psyche, right? Well, it can work just the opposite when we stand up and say, "Who in the hell's been raping our children?" You understand? We've got the information on them to where I don't think it's safe for children to be in their hands. As an example, this resource officer up here in Platte Canyon. Type in the Platte Canyon tragedy. You'll learn about it. But his name is Jeff Wood. And if you type in Jeff Wood, Park County, and then you look down at the bottom, scroll down, you'll see that he was elected and won a national award for school safety. And in this little town, we know him as a sexual pervert that is a predator that was at our school that caused the whole thing. And he wasn't even at the campus during the tragedy. He was AWOL. So how come this dude ends up with a National School Safety Award from one of these prestigious groups run by the Secret Service?
Very interesting.
Yeah, type it in yourself.
And
Jeff Wood, Park County, you'll see it.
Let's not forget Sheriff Pat Sullivan, too, for most people who are not from Colorado like we are. I mean, here's this guy who gets the illustrious Sheriff of the Year award during the Clinton administration, has a detention center built named after him. Then he's caught trading sex for drugs with a minor, a 17-year-old, but still, he's in a jumpsuit, imprisoned in his own detention center. There he is, Pat Sullivan, in the Pat Sullivan Justice Center, man. And this is the sheriff of Arapahoe County. Okay, this is where the Aurora shooting took place. All right, we're talking about this pedophile ring being very thick all over the world, just as you mentioned there in Australia. And, I mean, now we look at this poor young man, Mark Taylor, and what's happened here. I mean, here he's touching on three major issues, Popeye. He's talking about the pedophilia that wasn't reported and wasn't noticed. All this stuff went on repeated times, according
wasn't noticed. I love when they say that. Wasn't, well, we had no idea, right? And nobody had any idea about Jimmy Savile either, right? Really? Right. And furthermore, here's
big schools. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Here's a big point I want to point out. Here's a big thing I want to point out really quick. Everybody focuses on, Sandusky, what a dick. He's a scumbag. He needs to get, what's coming to him. And Savile and the rest of them. But those two in general, and there's others too, but look at who they're busting and who they're throwing out. The guys who procured the kids. Not the people that are paying the high-end dollars to actually get the kids and bring them into their mansions and stuff. No. They paid, or they're going after the people that were paid to get the kids, which they're horrible and they should be strung up from a pole just as much. But people are satisfied with having that monster thrown to the wolves. There are way bigger, scarier monsters out there than Savile and Sandusky, and those are the pieces of crap that we need to go and hunt down in the darkest corners where they hide. Okay, we need to not fear them. We need to make them fear us. Anybody that exploits a child at all is evil, period. End of story. Kids are innocent. There is no gray area. I don't want to hear it. You exploit a child, you need to leave the planet. End of story.
Just like there were pirates and slave ships back in the day, go down to the airport and start checking out all the business jets. Yeah, that's where you're going to find them. That's how they transport these kids now.
It's big
money. The same people that could afford a racehorse and have this expendable income are the customers that are trafficking the children. Now, let me go into trafficking quickly because Judy Chase is a friend of mine who her husband was murdered satanically by Satanist child traffickers. His body was discovered in Bear Creek 45 days after he disappeared. He had been tortured and mutilated. Okay? And it was because they were here to adopt children, and he had learned about this child trafficking operation, and they murdered him. And the name of the group, she learned, were called the Fat Cats.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Final segment of tonight's edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. That's right. Jimmy changed up my break schedule for Wednesday, so now Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will all have the same break schedule, the longer segment break schedule. So it'll be 2 longer segments instead of 4 shorter ones. So in the last 20-something minutes here with my guest tonight, first I want him, Ron, I want you to plug the Facebook page and the website and anything else you have connected, from Mark or any of this other information about all that we've been discussing tonight that people can go check out, including the information about how you guys were getting messed with COINTEL style techniques and all the other things. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, I promised everybody that I would let them research this. So if you want to read about the COINTELPRO, all you have to do is type in Hugging the Spotlight, Jessica Siegel. She was the author of this article. And if you don't want to read the whole thing, go down to where it says Media City, and you can read it in her words as to what she was discovering about Mike Smith. Going on, our website that has most of our investigative resources is a little hard to navigate, but if you can find some of the links, especially some of the videos we've done, it's a lot of information. But it's ColumbineFamilyRequest.org. And then Mark's Facebook page is fairly recent. We had Brandon Robb's mother, if you're familiar with that story of the Marine who was abducted because he was putting things on his Facebook page that was more patriotic than what the government wanted. She was successful in releasing her son, and then has come on Mark's behalf to do this Facebook page for Mark. So we have the Marines behind us here. And obviously, on that webpage, it's easier for us to post the latest information about the Adam Lanza Columbine connection. So that's where you're going to find most of that information. Personally, I've kind of a sidetrack here. I've been persecuted by this most tyrannical, can I say she's a Agenda 21 enforcer. She shut me out of trying to do any of my projects in Jefferson County, forced me to move out of the county so I could keep my business going. But in this case, she's been recognized by the White House with a trip to the inauguration as one of the 8 outstanding Americans that have benefited from the Obama's administration. So I've posted that on there, too. It's unbelievable that these people come out of the woodwork as being awarded for being the most brutal, hateful, ugly bureaucrats that you could imagine.
Well, we live in a backwards world when the president gets a Nobel Peace Prize for not doing anything, and then after getting the Nobel Peace Prize, engages in drone warfare on multiple countries, killing multiple hundreds of thousands. I guess it's like, I think in Pakistan it's like 2,000 or 3,000 innocent people so far, just in one country alone. And how many more thousands have died that we don't know or that go unreported? But it's a peace prize. So we live in bizarro world. I swear to God, one day I woke up and everything was completely switched around. Black was white. It's not the same place I grew up. It really isn't. And I know it didn't happen overnight, but man, it certainly seems that way.
Oh, yeah.
I was on a talk show in New Zealand a while back, and I apologize to the international audience that was listening for the conduct of our country. I remember this country as being very proud of what we did in World War II. All the veterans were coming back as heroes, and now they're coming back and committing suicide. I just don't understand why we have a military that'll stand for this, and I'm waiting for the coup. I am. I would guess that maybe if we can just separate ourselves out from all this politics and realize that our main goal here is to protect our children, that maybe we could all be on the same side.
I find it funny, though, how people are willing to attack gun owners and say it's for the protection of children. And it's like, dude, really? The gun owners aren't the problems. Guns aren't the problems. The real problem is the people that are taking advantage of your kids behind the scenes, and the things that they're doing to them are creating the monsters that go out there and do these horrific things. And you know what? I don't even want to call the kid a monster. I know people are going to have an issue with that statement. How could you not call him a monster? He killed children. Okay, that was a monstrous act. When he was doing that, he was a monster. But what created him? What made him that monster?
Take that anger that you have for these children, realize they're children, take that anger and direct it towards the system that created them.
I'm willing to bet that that anger he had at those kids, I'm willing to bet, and this is just something that I've seen in studies and stuff, I'm willing to bet that he saw himself in those kids as being innocent. And killing them might have been a way of him getting, attacking himself for being so innocent and not being able to protect himself from what happened to him. And it would be a way of him. Look, people do strange things. I've read many cases where people have done just that. They project the negative feelings they have about themselves from maybe they were victimized when they were younger, and they hate themselves for that. They maybe they feel they blame themselves, and then they project it out onto somebody else and act out violently on that person, when in reality it's not really the person that they're mad at, but that person is being used as kind of like a human dummy to fill that projected anger. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But Popeye, if it's even that, we have so many questions about Sandy Hook. We don't even know if this kid thought he was going along on a drill to protect kids. Next thing you know, everybody's being shot. They save the last bullet for him and put the gun in his hand.
Well, that's true too. I mean, that could have happened too. And again, that goes back to the MK Ultra thing, and then back to the sexual abuse as the trauma-based mind control that was used to compartmentalize his brain and control him.
Right. Exactly. I mean, we have no idea. Sandy Hook is more mysterious in many ways. At least they have some video clips and footage there of Klebold and Harris at Columbine.
They got video clips of Sandy Hook. They just don't release it. There's cameras there in that school. Don't let them tell you they ain't got no video footage. That's a lie.
There was video footage of Columbine that we never found. We found there were cameras that should have been working that they never mentioned. So, same thing.
Just a quick question. Ron, now we know that there were some of the forensics that seemed to indicate that some of the kids might have been hit by SWAT team fire from the roof. Wasn't there at least one student that was killed by police bullets that were firing down?
Brian Robo's son was obviously shot by a cop. We even had a man who was contacting Brian Robo, who Brian Robo taped. He was a deputy that Brian Rover knew personally. His name was also Taylor. But in this case, he was telling Robo that he knew that his son got shot by a cop. And then we had a Denver cop who was telling a lady at the school, at another school, at the elementary school, that he was afraid that he did shoot a child. So that was considered at the time a friendly fire incident, but they were lying about it too. Yeah. And then when we had the fact that there was a SWAT team on a roof, it very well could have been from the SWAT team. We don't know, because they had ballistics, but they didn't include any of the ballistics of the SWAT team.
Sounds a lot like Sandy Hook too, as well, where we have these other individuals out there. I've listened to the police radio report. I'm sure you've probably heard that. They're talking about fire subsiding, and then they go up past, they see some shadows running past the gymnasium. Then they're up there, and there's a confrontation, and they're pointing, and they've arrested at least one person who's prone on the ground, and sitting in the front seat, not the back seat, the front seat of the police car, while they catch some other guy that's running up in the woods. And so, we don't know who's doing all of this. We're always told that the kids are themselves the perpetrators, but, in the Sandy Hook situation and the Aurora shooting, and of course the Sikh temple where they said at least 4 people showed up, one guy is blamed. The question is, we don't even know who's really doing all of this, and this is never going to be investigated. I remember when Police Chief Dan Oates was at the press conference after the Aurora shooting, there were several questions. You can see this on YouTube, by the way, too, of people asking him, where are the surveillance tapes of the theater? And he kind of blinks and looks the other way like he's answering another question. He's asked again 3 times, and there's one of these special agents is sitting behind him kind of smiling and smirking at the way the police chief is avoiding these questions. So he's already got it narrowed down to one shooter in spite of all the other witnesses and all the other reports. And just like you said with, Mark Taylor, who was talking about other fire coming in there. They were saying as many as 3 or 4 accomplices, and maybe more than that, in Columbine to begin with, before it became just Dylan and
here's a connection, by the way, to the military-industrial complex, which does a lot of this mind control. They remember, there's technology more than just trauma-based. They also do the sonic and the laser light crap and all that stuff. NASA has a big part in this. I swear to God, if anybody thinks I'm lying, go research it. You'll see what I'm talking about. But one of them, and I can't remember which one of them, one of them's parents worked for Raytheon. And I can't remember which one of them, but one of them had a connection to Raytheon. Now, look, and people could go, oh, that's just coincidence. Maybe so, but that whole area, Steve, as you know, Colorado, in that whole area there, that's like spook central.
A lot of military-industrial complex people out here.
And you can put a blindfold on, pick up a rock, spin around 16 times and throw the rock in any general direction, and you're liable to hit a spook with it. And no, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about the old racist term. I'm talking about intelligence spooks, CIA, people with, or as my good friend Susan Lindauer would call them, spooky people. Because remember, she was a CIA asset. She knows
exactly. You ought to be called CIAU, okay?
Right.
University is a school for the CIA. Not only that, we were kind of wondering why they put this woman in ahead of the investigation, the Columbine investigation.
Yeah.
She, I'm trying to remember her name right now, just skip me. But we've discovered her little pathway leads into some of these think tank groups that are very much in line with the UN agendas. In other words, the reason that she had never, why can't I think of her name? I'll come up with it. She had never even so much as been in charge of a murder investigation, and suddenly she's in charge of the Columbine investigation, largest investigation in the history of the state of Colorado. And then we find out that she was the one that prepared the paperwork that was to be submitted to the judge after they served the search warrant. So she was in this inside group that was covering up the pedophilia. So she must have been the brightest of that group, thinking that they would just keep it inside and they could cover it up that way. Well, this woman, being the head of the investigation, obviously knew about the search warrant, and we didn't discover that until CBS News forced it out. In other words, they got a Freedom of Information Act to force it out that there was a search warrant, and we would have never known that.
Yeah.
And the 15 contacts that they had with cops, we would have never known about that, because there was a meeting 3 days after Columbine where all the attorneys for the county and the district attorney, the sheriff's department's people, even Janet Reno, we believe, was there, where they decided that they were going to destroy all the information in their computer files and documents to make it look like they had no contacts with these boys. So they were caught red-handed destroying all this information. Every one of those attorneys that were at that meeting should have lost their law license. And that was even thrown in front of the Supreme Court of Colorado. And they made a decision that nothing was done wrong there. And in this case, no, it was a secret meeting where they were already covering up. We were planning funerals at the time. You understand?
Yeah.
And they were sitting around deciding that they were going to create this belief that they didn't know anything about these boys. And here the lead investigator knew about the search warrant, and none of that paperwork had an official documentation number on it. They were planning on keeping that secret, so all the paperwork that you have about that search warrant had been never put into the files until forced by CBS News. Unbelievable how they've been doing this in front of God and everybody, and particularly the media here is a part of it. Believe me, we've been to every one of these. What you'll be interested in to go to our Columbine Family Request website is we actually have Peter Boyles and Judy Hayden talking about what we learned about it, because they were more interested in the Sullivan case, but they were talking about what Sullivan didn't do in reference to the right thing to do about Columbine. And then we also have John DeCamp on the Peter Boyle show. So it's not like it's anybody's secret around here. Everybody knows this.
Then we see Ken Salazar going right up the steps to the Senate and then into the Department of Interior. And, of course, he's whitewater rafting while the BP oil spill happens, never dealt with anything from Fukushima. And now he gets a free ticket back home because he's going to take the Hillary Clinton ride out, during the second part of the administration. So this guy was involved he was the state attorney general and just sidetracked everything from virtually the start. Isn't that right, Ron?
Let me interject this because you brought this up when you mentioned this when we were going into break, and I want to interject this because you see how we're mentioning all these big names. So Ron mentioned something right as we were going into break, the fat cats. Who do you think the fat cats are? In some cases, it's some of these very same people, and if not them, people that they are trying to protect at all costs. So, I mean, when you look into the fat cats, when you look into all these people that buy these kids and stuff, who are they? Some of them are these people. Well, some of these are the very same people that are supposed to be investigating. So you have the fox guarding the hen house.
Well, all you have to do is read the Judy Chait case, and she'll tell you that she got her information of what their name was from a judge. Yeah, these judges were talking in New York City about her case, and someone overheard them and told her that this judge knew all about the fat cats and that they were circling the wagons around her adopted children. So that's where it goes. It goes into our judicial. It goes into our politics. In reference to Salazar becoming a senator and then going on, he's replaced by
Michael Bennett.
Michael Bennett, okay.
Right. Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, he was appointed, right?
Right.
And then it just so happens that Mark and Donna and I go in to have a pizza one day, and there sits Michael Bennett. So I went up and I introduced myself to Michael Bennett, and I brought him over to Mark and Donna's trailer, and we told him this stuff. And he goes, "Oh, my God." I said, "Yeah." I said, "And you were the superintendent of Denver Public Schools at that time." He goes, "Oh, I was." And he ran out of there like he was on fire.
Yeah, that guy's a scumbag. Absolutely.
All I can tell you is these people run like hell when we're telling them the truth instead of standing up for the children. It's most amazing.
Yeah, but they'll stand on those same children's dead bodies when they need to push a political agenda, won't they?
Oh, yeah, he's out pushing the gun agenda right now.
Yep.
And then all of our Democratic senators and congressmen and everybody, they're all a part of this. We have, what's her name now? Well, let me go on to where it's really more important. We really need to discuss the connection between the Columbine and the school shooting. Theater shooting. Because the same judge, this Sullivan, was convicted, if you want to call it that. He got, 18 days? And he was a admitted child molester. He answered the question when he was asked, "Have you raped any children?" And they have had people come forward and said that they were raped. But he says, "I wouldn't remember. I was on drugs." In other words, he didn't answer the question like he should answer the question. Absolutely not, And in this case, he admitted to it. And they would never go any further than to charge him with the crimes that they had busted him for during the
drug
operation. Yeah. And during that, they had 22 officers working on this. They spent millions of dollars investigating him, and they never found one other charge against him, including the fact that he didn't do by us the Columbine victims. So I find...
The same judge is now on the cinema case?
Yeah, Sylvester. And then we've got the same Attorney General, Southers, ran off from Donna during a political meeting down in Colorado Springs. She had approached him and asked, and started sharing the information with him. He jumped in his Lexus and drove off. So he knows all this stuff. And I actually had an interview with a detective, starts with an F. Anyway, I had this interview with them after Sullivan had been arrested, sharing with the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department what we learned. I also called the district attorney's office. Carol Chambers told her office. And I also checked into Souther's office to make sure that that interview that I had was a part of the package that was given to the Attorney General's office when he took over the investigation from Carol Chambers. So Southers knows this stuff. And we're never bashful about sharing this. In other words, that's what our intentions are when we call and we want to talk to a senator or a congressman or a president or whoever we're talking to. And we're quite clear as to what we've learned. And so far, none of these people in the position of trust can hear the word rape. Did you know that the 1986 Child Protection Act requires them to investigate suspicion of rape? I don't care what it is.
That's why they don't want to hear it, because if they hear it, then they have to go investigate it, and they know where it's going to lead them, because half of them are probably in on it already or know about it and don't want to go there because it's like the third rail.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is they hear it and don't do anything about it. So they broke the law right there. Yeah, if you want to know if your own child ever gets raped by a cop and you call Safety Tell, you're going to end up with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department answering the phone, and they're not going to do anything about it.
Or investigate you.
And that's what they've done to us for 13 years.
Well, that's horrific. Guys, we're out of time. We got the last hour just blew right by. Ron, thank you so much for your time. Steve, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, check out the websites and make sure you go on Facebook and look up Release Mark Taylor. Check it out, Release Mark Taylor. And make sure you spread this broadcast. Radio show host, check him out, get him on, spread the word. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Love you all.